duty as a Muslim, not just as an American. SubhanAllah, our faith teaches us to be engaged in any society that we're in and to give back and do it in excellence. And I think a big part of being an American Muslim, first and foremost, is recognizing that whatever rights and empowerment and privilege that we have now is based on the stories of our past and narratives of our past. And so I think before we can even start to talk about civic engagement, or even as we talk about civic engagement, one of the most important things to do is to acknowledge our American Muslim story. And each of them has a unique one. Mine starts before, actually, I stepped foot in the United States. I was born in a one-bedroom apartment in Beirut at a time that the Israeli invasion had occurred. My aunt delivered me while family was surrounded in this apartment because my parents could not go to the hospital to deliver me in a way, in a manner that healthcare was available. I remember being in staircases, hiding on the lowest floors because my family lived in the city on a higher floor and we wanted to be able to make sure we were protected. So my American story begins escaping war, where my family came to make sure that they had a safe place for their children in which they can survive. I remember traveling and coming and then living in my aunt's basement in Chicago and Lombard, where many guests came to visit from across the globe. And we stayed there for 6 months, and subhanAllah, my parents thought that they were going to return, and lo and behold, they did not. We stuck around. And because of that, I was the person in my family that convinced my parents that it was important to vote. You know, as an immigrant child, I think we understand and can relate to that, and recognizing that this is their country too, and their voice is important and it matters. And so that's my American Muslim story. It starts about 1970 something, don't know exactly, but I'm going to put my over there. And I would like to do this little exercise because I think it's helpful to recognize how long we've been here and where our story begins. For African American Muslims, many of which came not out of their own choice, because they were enslaved and came to the United States, they were Muslims that came, and that's their American Muslim story. And so I'd like you all to take a look, maybe after the presentation, to this summary, and this is a really important summary, because it's a recognition of who we are as American Muslims and that we belong. Because oftentimes political rhetoric, which we're experiencing right now, oftentimes tells us otherwise. And we're very much a fabric of this country, and our heritage beautifies this country as well. Before we go to the next slide, I want to be able to ask, and I prefer to walk around, but apparently I've been asked to stand right here. Why is it important to partake in civic engagement? Just comments from the audience. Feel free to raise your hand and say yes.
Justice.
Justice. Because of justice. Good answer. Yes.
More accurate, popular vote.
Can you repeat that?
The popular vote is more accurate.
So you need to participate in civic engagement because the popular vote is important. Okay. Who else? Yes.
Setting up the future.
Setting the stage for a future that you want to be able to see or envision. Good one. Yes.
Having a voice. Being able to your ideas across. Change policy.
Having a voice and being able to change policy and laws, yes.
If you're not at the table, we are on the menu.
For not on the table or on the menu. Absolutely. Anyone from this side? Yes? Somebody had their hand raised over here.
You're saying the same thing, you already stole my line.
The line got stolen, mashallah. Everybody has these great ideas. Yes?
Also provide the dawah opportunity for us. We are presenting not just ourselves, but the reflection of the character of our beloved Prophet ﷺ and the teaching of our Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we are civically, politically engaged, we are representing those principles and that character.
MashaAllah. For those that are joining us online, giving dawah and representing the best characteristics and qualities of what it means to be a Muslim, following the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amazing and impressive answer. And anyone of policy, we've calculated out of decisions. A part of the reason why we can calculate it out is because we have a very high number of registered Muslim voters. We just don't show up. So we need to be able to convert that. We're almost always ready to be able to vote, but when it comes to actually participating, we're not showing up. That's what data says. And so we want to be able to change that. If our Muslim brothers and sisters literally being killed with our own taxpayer dollars is not going to move us, then we may need to do some self-reflection. Even when the decision is difficult, we still lean in, inshallah. Before I go on to the next slide, and I want to be able to take a step back, because civic engagement means a lot of things to a lot of people. So I want to be able to ask you all, when I say civic engagement, we just talked about voting. What are some other ways to be civically engaged? You have to raise your hand, you can just say yes. What is it? So pushing back against propaganda that's in the media, calling your local station and being like, hey, that's not cool, that's a lie. That's misinformation. That is being civically engaged, right? So responding to the negative is a way to be civically engaged. What are some other ways to be civically engaged? Yes?
So there are many ways we can engage, and of course there's a lot of challenges, especially in the Western country, because majority of the social gathering happens around the places where we don't want to be, like casinos, the bars, etc. But we have other channels available. Number one is the formal dawah efforts, or the district level program that happens around the summertime. So we can have representation there. We can engage at the school district level. You know, we have the PDAC.
So when you say engage, what does that mean? What does that look like at the school district level? Let's say, for example.
For example, as a mom, you can volunteer at the school by showing your face over there, your presence, mere presence makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Because then people would know what a Muslim looks like, how a Muslim behaves, and they become an advocate for us in our absence, because they have learned firsthand the Muslim character, the Muslim behavior through the interaction and through our presence over there. The other channel available is the social media. Social media, there are a lot of effort to demonize Muslims and malign the names of the Muslims. So it is our responsibility to respond, but in a manner that is commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that idfa'a billati hiya ahsan. So we do not respond in kind, even in the face of negativity. So social media is another channel. At workplace, we can interact.
Mashallah.
So these are any time, even at the mall, in the shopping center, there are a lot of opportunities. To your neighbor, your presence is not without reason. Your presence is a reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you to propagate the message of our beloved Prophet.
100%. Mashallah. Thank you so much, brother. A few ways that we talked about being engaged within the school, volunteering for the school, being involved in the PTA, as a mother or even a father. We talked about in the workplace. So wherever you have the opportunity to provide additional time, your presence is needed, because in your absence, decisions are going to be made on your behalf. Yes?
Actually, along the same lines, that put Muslim candidates in the powers of position. And even if it's like a small thing, that we look, but instead of like the state and the federal, the local positions impact us the most.
Yes.
So if we can put Muslim representation in those little areas, like you said, the PTA, the library, the homeowners association, wherever.
Homeowners association is a big one.
The city, the state, federal, of course, it affects, but the most affected are the local ones.
Yes.
So if you can put even the library, so if you put Muslim candidates, that makes a huge difference. So that would be besides, identifying the candidates that you're teaching us, how to identify the candidates who value your values
Yes.
and who are kind of supporting the ideas, that you support. Besides that, basically putting the Muslim candidates in those positions of even little powers.
Yes.
Would be civic engagement in 5 different.
100%. You're absolutely right. So it's finding viable candidates, making sure that there's candidates that represent us, whether they be in the Muslim community or otherwise, and those candidates that will make sure that they are pushing our values, our policies, our issues that impact us in the way that we want. 100%. And the idea of homeowner associations, that's oftentimes impacts us the most, and that's actually where discrimination oftentimes happens the most. I mean, prior to this position, I was the executive director at CARE, Ohio, and literally a lot of the issues and complaints that would come to us would be people who either lived in condos or apartments, and who was discriminating against them in terms of rules. It was an inequitable way of selective choice. When the rules would apply, they would apply to those that were Muslim or Black and brown. And so absolutely, people are making decisions on our behalf when we are absent at the table. We're on the menu. Anyone else can think of ways that you could be civically engaged? I think there's some young people in the audience. How can you be civically engaged if you're a young person? Because this is not just for adults, it actually starts when you're much younger. What are some ways to be involved in spaces or places around you?
Community service.
Community service is a really excellent one. What else? Clubs. You can actually run for positions even in your school, and that can influence decisions within your school system. We've seen a lot of repression over the last year in terms of the ability to actually just, run fundraisers for people who are in need, because somehow that's perceived as you are representing some sort of violence, which is completely unacceptable. So we've seen a rise in that. And again, I'm going to fall back on just my experience over the last 4 years, is the difference in students who are civically engaged within their school and are in leadership positions actually did much better for their ability to advocate on behalf of those that were oppressed than those schools who didn't already have students that were organized. Huge difference. And so it's so important to start even when you're young. And it's hard sometimes as parents for us to see our kids to be in these positions, because literally then they stand out, that means they're also targeted, and you feel like they're not supported. But there are, mashallah, a lot of organizations around that want to be able to have the back of your kids and want to be able to have the backs of you as you are on the front lines of this kind of work. These are great answers. Yes.
Well, when you talk about the young generation, obviously I come from the first generation immigrated, and we had put all our time and energy in putting our careers, establishing our families under the race. But that was at the cost of basically not engaging in the mainstream America. That was at the cost of not fulfilling our responsibilities, towards that cause. So for young generation, when they talk about that, I think we have enough doctors and engineers and the computer scientists. So journalism and law are the areas, that we should be teaching our children, to go towards and work for those.
Okay.
And again, that would be the area I would say also is a part of civic engagement, that we can teach our young generation, to follow the steps.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. MashaAllah, as a father, right, being able to say that as an elder in the community, being able to say that we have to be strategic about pulling out and seeing what are the skills that our young people have, and channeling and facilitating a space in which they can be and see themselves in careers that oftentimes their parents are not a part of. And actually, based on that, I'm just going to plug, we actually have internships available for college students and for high school students at the Coalition, in which we also facilitate that space for them and create and open doors and provide them with connections. And so we're more than happy, whether that be it's a policy position or an advocacy position or otherwise, inshallah. If you're interested, please reach out. These are all great answers. And this is an important piece, because oftentimes when we're talking about civic engagement, it's in the run-up to the election, and it's about like this one day. After the election, we need to be as civically engaged, if not more. And so that's a really important piece for us to recognize. We seem to be surrounding ourselves with who are we going to vote for president, and there's a lot of discussions about that, which, don't get me wrong, is important. But it's one aspect of a broader base of engagement that we need to sort of recognize as a Muslim community. And so I'm going to take it, it's beautiful outside, probably, rather be sitting on your decks with your family. So you being here tells me that you are committed to inshallah, is exactly to this idea. What happens when we're civically engaged? You all may or may not know that the Wazir resolution that was actually written by the Muslim Civic Coalition and took about a year to pass through ups and downs and challenges, through attempting to pass it in the State House and not finding a viable way or solution, all the way through, making sure that it passes within Congress, being able to get a hearing for it in a committee that is very difficult to get a hearing in, but then also being able to pass it through the Senate unanimously is a huge success. So I want us to be able to sit in that. That's, of course, we are responsible to be civically engaged in the manner and energy that we have, and the privilege that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, and the rest is up to Allah. Hands it out, we're not responsible for the outcome. We're just responsible for doing our part, right? And so, subhanAllah, Wazir's name was mentioned in the halls of Congress. His name was not erased. The fact that he was killed in a hate crime was acknowledged. The fact that Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate exists, even though so many of those folks that sat on the hearing wanted to erase that fact, subhanAllah ended up passing. That doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen because our organization worked on it. It happens because we all work together. It happened because there's a lot of staffers in the background that we knew, connections. We coordinated, we strategized, we called on allies, we brought in and built in organizations. So it's talent coming together in a way that's coordinated that leads to these kinds of successes. And inshallah, one resolution will become 10. And there's many others, bills and laws that have been passed in the State House that impact your students, including the social studies curriculum in your children's schools, to be able to talk about heritage and talk about Islam. These are all aspects that are really important. So changing policy is a really important aspect of what we do with the coalition, but we can only do it with elected officials that ally with us, that believe in the same issues as us, are willing to support us and champion our causes, or that look like us. Because that's a really important aspect of making sure that we can make changes that impact us every day. So I wanted to be able to share that because we need to sit in that as we sort of move on. Yes?
I'd like to share, and people of Naperville can correlate very well with that. Right in our neighborhood, Plainfield, where this incident happened.
Yes.
Right? And then there was another incident a few years back when a masjid was being built in Plainfield, and initially the right to build the masjid was denied by 5-4 in the city council. And then the neighboring communities, the people of Plainfield, we built alliances, we approached the elected officials, and then alhamdulillah, one of the ladies on the city council, she agreed with our call. And the hearing, and she had the right to call for another vote. And the hall was, the entire building was absolutely packed. And alhamdulillah, when the second vote was called, it was 5-4 in favor of the masjid. Before it was denied.
And I hope you're protecting an elected official, because these are successes that we need to be able to acknowledge as a community, just like the other way around.
One vote made the difference.
Absolutely.
One vote, and our engagement, our efforts, collective efforts did make a difference.
100%, 100%. I appreciate you mentioning that. And again, it's the local issues matter because they impact us in very real ways. You want to build messages. Zoning, who decides on zoning? It's your city council or your commissioner whomever sort of the village or the space that you're in. So absolutely, you bring up a really good point. So I wanted to be able to also share, so Muhammad Ali, acknowledging he was an American Muslim. He's part of our heritage and history. People often know him as a boxer, but not oftentimes acknowledging that he's a Muslim. And so the Muhammad Ali Day, the passing of that, commemorating that is a really important aspect of educating our neighbors and students in school around who we are as a Muslim community. And we're inching towards that education that's really important to be able to uplift our story and tell our narrative that is complete opposite and to what is oftentimes told about us, especially in the run-up to elections. So who are we as an American Muslim community? In Illinois, we actually have the largest per capita Muslim population in the nation. I noticed that because when I moved back after a very long time, mashallah, our Muslims are everywhere, and it's such a beautiful thing. And that's important to know because as you are in schools or as you're talking to your elected officials, we have a few copies of the Illinois Muslim Report. Give it to your elected officials. It's really important that they understand when they are calculating you out, when you're talking to them about an issue that's important to you and your children and your family and your neighbors and your community, that you're not, the data needs to align, right? And the data does, and they need to understand that not only do you matter as a person, but there's many people that you represent that think the exact same way. And they care about the exact same issues. So it's really important for us to know what the data backing is. And so after us is Virginia, and then our values are around justice. Somebody here said civic engagement is about justice. Absolutely, it's about justice and peace. And faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. We talked about that. We try our best to inch towards justice, to inch towards equity, but of course these are qualities of perfection that are Allah's qualities. But at the same time, the outcome is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're very diverse. We have a lot of intersectionalities. We're not going to align on all the issues, and I think if anything, we've seen recently have WhatsApp groups with a lot of opinions, and they're not always exactly the same. We have a lot of great ideas about how to, have solutions to different things, but we're not the same because we literally are diverse. We're actually the most diverse religious group as compared to other religious groups in the United States. We have no race or ethnicity that is the majority. SubhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we created nations and tribes to know one another, but even within our Muslim community, we may be amongst masjid where we're majority ethnicity, right, or background. But the fact of the matter is, as an American Muslim community, and here represented in Illinois, we're actually very, very diverse, which means we come from different perspectives, which means we come with different ideas and priorities and issues. One of the most beautiful things that I loved, and I'm going to point out my son back there, Hamza. He's my youngest. So he came because this is his first time at ICN. He has some friends that come to this masjid. And he said, I heard they have a gym. So when he walked in, of course, there's, young boys shooting a basketball, which is very beautiful, which tells me that this masjid understands that our younger generation is actually very large as compared to other faith groups. And so as institutions, we need to be prioritizing that. It also tells us, for instance, as a Muslim Civic Coalition, that we need to be thinking about laws that impact our young people, because they are in schools in which oftentimes there isn't representation. It's one of the reasons why, we wrote and passed the Muhammad Ali commemoration, as well as, social studies, as well as being able to wear your hijab or other faith garments while playing sports. These are things that impact our young people every single day. And we want to make sure that not only do they feel proud to be Muslim, but it's easy for them to practice their faith. Because we want to be able to make sure that they keep their faith generations to come, inshallah. And we care about civic engagement. SubhanAllah, this gathering is proof of that. and this is based on, again, the Illinois Muslim Civic poll. These are all really important because these are conversation pieces that you can have with your elected officials, because that's another way to be civically engaged. So, I'm gonna go back. We talk a lot about what are, who we are as a Muslim community, but if I were to ask you, what do you think is, the biggest issue, or some of the looming issues for us as a Muslim community, what would that be if you were to answer me today or a year ago? What is the biggest looming issue for us? Yes.
Foreign policy.
Foreign policy. Yes. I'm sorry? Continuity? Can you explain a little bit further what you mean by that?
Like comes together. For example, like with what's going on, we've been boycotting. But not everybody's boycotting because everybody has different beliefs.
Okay.
That continuity, everybody comes together and gets on the same page.
So part of the issues that we have is being able to be on the same page together with regards to like an action we think will make a difference. And if you use the example of, say, boycotting, what are some other issues that you feel are really important to address in the Muslim community? Yes.
Like our children be able to be raised on the values, that we value the most.
Yeah.
Not influenced by some of the other characteristics, that are except of the way we be able to raise them the values that we.
Yeah, it's a really good point. One of the biggest issues that the brother had mentioned is being able to raise our younger generation, our children, with the values of Islam, the values that we want to be able to make sure that they're able to pass down even to their children. What else do you feel like is a looming issue? Yes.
Educating ourselves about how local governments work in our areas. We focus on the federal level, we focus on the state level. We don't realize how impactful these smaller races are and how much influence we can have when we try and get appointed to a board or a commission at the level. We talked about our youth. Every city has a youth advisory board. You don't have to run for it. All you have to do is apply for it. You can ask your high schoolers or college-going students to apply for it. When the 248 project was going on, we quickly realized that people that were on the Planning and Zoning Commission were extremely against our community. And that's why we were hitting the roadblocks that we were hitting. So if we had people from our community that were on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we have so many more boards and commissions like that in Aurora and in Naperville. So educating ourselves on all of these local grassroots levels of engagement is absolutely imperative for us to do that because we are already 100 years behind. If we don't do that right now, it's going to be very big for us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's around understanding how important it is to be civically engaged at the local level and the impact, the immense amount of impact and conversion that we get when we do apply ourselves. And the fact that some of the challenges around zoning actually have to do with who's sitting on the advisory board. That they in fact did not want the zoning to pass for the masjid, but had there been representation on this commission or advisory board, that would have been different. That's a really important, so issues around understanding how to participate in the process and the impact that that has. It's very future thinking, yes. Yes.
So one of the biggest challenge is there is a concentrated and coordinated effort to propagate Islamophobia. And that particular issue, maligning the name of Muslim, even to an extent that taking an incident that a Muslim delivery guy supposedly spat into the food while delivering and then exaggerating to an extent that this is the Muslim character, Muslim behavior, the impact of that is really, really very serious because then our kids, boys and girls, they get bullied at their school. And in fact, when a child was in 8th or 9th grade, that time all the ISIS thing was happening. And a lot of Muslim kids were being bullied. This kid was so devastated by the bullying of his friend, facing isolation, that he lost interest in going to school. And it did impact not only his career, he developed a lot of mental health issues, and then he, it impacted his life.
Yeah.
So this is one case that came to surface
Yes,
that we knew about,
yes,
but there are hundreds of thousands of such incidents. How many of our kids, when they go to college interview, medical interview, engineering interview, they get discriminated and can't do much about it.
Yeah.
A lot of our sisters, they get bullied, they get harassed. One of the sisters, she got pushed into traffic
And
right
terminated.
on Jackson Avenue in,
Yes.
in heart of Chicago. A lot of our girls, they came home crying. A lot of our youngsters who went to engineering colleges, they could not get the job because of this Islamophobia.
Yeah.
So the impact is real.
yeah.
And just because it has not touched your and my son, it does not mean that it will not happen to their kids.
Yeah, no, have no doubt it has touched you and your kids. Sometimes we're just not aware of it. I don't want to digress, but that is a really important issue, and I encourage you. I'm going to mention two things I think that are a little bit separate. One that has to do, and I'm going to plug in here Yaqeen, only because, and before actually I do that, are you all aware of the Islamophobia Network? So-called nonprofit organizations, basically their whole mission is to propagate anti-Muslim hate. A lot of their money actually is dark money, and it comes from overseas. Not a surprise, a lot of them have relationships actually with Zionist entities, not a surprise, or even with the entities, not a surprise. And this is stuff we know and we feel in the run-up to elections. But I say this because the answer actually to anti-Muslim hate, so the IS group did a study, and when they created this Islamophobia index, and when they did their study, they tried to see how high the Islamophobia index was in some people and how low. And actually, based on their study, and actually just as even I'm speaking to you, it gives me goosebumps because I did youth work, even before the work that I did in advocacy. The highest rate of the Islamophobia index was with our own children. So the impact of Islamophobia is actually not meant to impact other people's opinions on us. It impacts us. So when we talk about bringing down the values all the way to our generations, anti-Muslim hate impacts how our own kids feel about themselves. And the way to actually react or to counter Islamophobia is actually to give our kids a purpose and something to do. The way to counter that is to make sure that they are civically engaged and have a voice. That's absolutely the way. And so I hope that inshallah, Masajid like this one actually involves our youth in these efforts, because that's, subhanAllah, anti-Muslim hate makes our kids pull away. That's not an accident. But when we civically engage or help them to civically engage and give them a purpose, subhanAllah, that actually counters the feelings that they have about their own faith. And of course, then, I'm not going to delve into all the details because that's a different presentation for a different time. But one of the reasons that the Yaqeen Institute actually started, one of the reasons why we have organizations like CARE, one of the reasons why we have organizations like the Muslim Civic Coalition is because we're all countering anti-Muslim hate, because it's a concerted effort, it's not an accident. And so we want to be able to make sure that we have institutions that are organized, we have institutions like this one in Masada that understand that this is what we're up against, and utilize the activities, the events, the resources that they have in their masajid to focus on the younger generation, but to give them an avenue to participate. That is the way to counter anti-Muslim hate. So I appreciate that you mentioned that. But I do want to sort of delve back into the presentation, because there's things that are big that we can all work on together, inshallah, but there's also things that are real in our everyday. So when we talk about resources, we said we have the youngest generation of Muslims. That's both an opportunity and something that we have to be thinking about resources, but also for our sandwich generation. We have elders in our community that we have to care for. How are we thinking in terms of the resources that are being provided by our government? Are they accommodating our own parents in the resources that they have available? Is there language support in the resources that they have available? Are they making sure that there's a liaison maybe to our community that's facilitating a way for them to access oftentimes free help and free care? Are we taking advantage of that? Oftentimes we feel like we have to do it all right? So just enough things to be able to think about. We want a need that we have that many people said, raise your hand if you're a healthcare professional. Okay, that's great. What we know, and you know, oftentimes is that some of the Muslim needs, based on the data that we had, you know, collected and put together, is that there isn't culturally appropriate mental health being provided to our community. But we know, based on data from a few polls, the Family and Youth Institute and Maristan and the department that they had opened at Stanford, that actually in our community, we have, I'm not going to say the data, but a very high rate of suicidal ideation amongst our own kids. But there's a way to combat that when our community is equipped to be able to make sure that it addresses that. What's more important is that mental health services are not accommodating culturally their understanding of Muslims and Islam. And so these are all really important because there are resources that are available, but if we don't demand them, if we don't share that these are our needs with our elected officials, they're not going to otherwise know. We are the experts to be able to share with those elected officials. Islamophobia, we mentioned that already, the brother here, and I think everyone was nodding their head, I would agree. But there are ways to combat that, we talked about it. So, you know, we need laws that represent us, that answer some of the issues or solutions to the issues that we have. There are specific needs that we have as a Muslim community that no one else is going to know but us. And we need trusted officials that are representing us in their places of power to be able to make sure that they can push these issues for us, or otherwise it wouldn't happen. And that's why voting matters. That's why voting matters. Just give it a minute. So I think Salah's at 8. Thank you for that. What's being passed around right now is actually a sample ballot for here in Naperville. Now, it doesn't mean that this is your sample ballot. You may live in another district and still come to this masjid. The reason why we're printing it out is that oftentimes we've been talking about who to vote for president, but we're not talking about the down ballot races. And we did discuss very early on that one of the reasons why I should vote is because the down ballot races are really important. And we talked about subhanAllah, you all are very aware of all the ways that have been impacted directly. So this is a sample ballot. What I want you to do is just to take a look at it, and then I'm going to stick around here with Marie. And if you have any questions about what is on your ballot, just come up and ask. There are a few ballot issues that are actually on there, aside from the candidates, aside from the down ballot candidates too as well. So if you have questions about them, or how to vote for someone, or why someone is not on this ballot, please let us know. We also want you to make sure that you're registered and ready. We talked about the Muslim community being a very high community in terms of registered voters, but they don't show up. Sometimes we move, we change our address, we change our name. You may have somebody in the family that just turned 18, like my son. So I want to make sure that he's registered to vote once he turns 18. And so sometimes it's just something we forget. So if you want to register to vote or check your registration, come to the table. We'll be able to make sure that, inshallah. In general, we want to be able to take action. And so we talk about changing our laws. We talked about advocating. You all are, inshallah, a very well-versed community in terms of doing that. But we also want to be able to show up to vote. The fact that we've been calculated out means that we are seen not as a powerful voting bloc or community. We will be taken seriously and we can show our power, we can send a message to say, we show up to vote. Even if we all don't vote for the same thing, as a community, we show up to vote. And then there's no choice then for some of these elected officials to come to us and ask us, what are your needs? Right? So it's really important that we showcase that, inshallah. Here are some of the social media handles. I'll put them up in a little bit. But I do want to talk about just a little bit more broadly what we do with the Muslim Civic Coalition, and there's a few initiatives. Advocacy and policy, voter education and turnout, which is what we're talking about here. But we also share some of the information around data, and we also help institutions to build capacity around the work that they do, inshallah. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions, or conversations, or discussions, or comments. And what is on your mind right now? Yes.
Given current situation, right, one candidate openly encouraged support genocide. Other candidate is basically, he's a killer of the democracy. And knowing that, how do we, that's kind of.
Contend with that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I know that's what's on everyone's mind.
Are we fulfilling our responsibility properly?
Yeah. So here's a few things that I'll tell you, and I'm going to talk in my personal capacity here, not as somebody who is presenting on behalf of the coalition. Here's what I'm going to do. Okay? I can share actually what I'm going to do even at the messages. What I'm going to do is actually send a message to the duopoly. I happen to be registered to vote in Illinois. Illinois is 17 points safe in a very blue state. So I have the privilege to be able to send a message to both parties and say that I'm going to vote for a party. That's what I plan on doing. To your question though, you're asking a very right question. And I'm going to answer it in just a minute. But what I would also say is don't let that question prevent you from going to the polls. I want you to make sure that you go to vote, even if you don't know the answer to that question. The day you get to the poll, leave that one blank. Vote for everything else down the ballot. Because it will still be marked that you voted. And that's what's important here. Does that make sense? If you feel like it just doesn't sit well with you to vote for either one, that's okay. Leave that part blank. But you should still show up, pull a ballot, and vote for those candidates that you think are important to stay in office. That's what's really important, okay? Then to your question. We're in a position that we are damned if we do and we damned if we don't. And that's by calculation. Like I said, we've been calculated out. The policies that are either on the right or the left are just not including us as a Muslim community. But why is that? Because we don't have that political power yet. But we can showcase that in this election. And what we don't want to do is overanalyze and prevent ourselves from actually making the decision that actually gives us the power. Does that make sense? And so I agree with that question. That's a question I sit with. Alhamdulillah, I don't live in a swing state. And I'm not registered to vote in a swing state. But what we can't prevent ourselves is from not showing up. Does that make sense? I hope that kind of fulfills an answer. Yes?
In larger races, bigger races, yes, we do not have the critical mass yet, but at the local level, we could make a huge difference.
We do make a huge
We
difference.
make a huge difference.
Yes. Oftentimes, those elections are actually won by 5 points, by 100 votes. 100 votes, 50 votes, 25 votes. Those are the same people that sit on the advisory commission that are not letting zoning happen for our messages. Those are the same people who are repressing our kids in the schools that they go to because they happen to be sitting on school boards. Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, brother. So let's not get over like the analysis paralysis that we've been doing as a community with regards to what's at the top of the ticket. We want to make sure it's not preventing us from focusing on where we actually have political power. Remember what we said? In Illinois, we have the largest per capita Muslim population. Guess where they're all densely populated? We are all densely populated. The Chicagoland area. Here in Naperville, we have a very large Muslim community. I would hope that there's a recognition that actually you do have political power. And every single person who's an elected official should actually be scared out of their wits because you all are registered to vote. Just show up. Just show up. That's really important. Great questions. Yes.
I wanted to add a few things to your question, brother. Sometimes, we are not comfortable voting because the candidates that are there are not the right candidates. But when we talk about what the sister's talking here about, civic empowerment, civic empowerment it's a broad term. It has many components as part of that. I'll give you an example. One of the slides that the sister was showing, which is what are the needs of the Muslim community? One is we take care of elder care, right? So 29% of the folks we're talking about, and I'm one of those people who are taking care of the elderly parents, right? How does the city of Naperville get the right amount of funding? It happens through the every decade there's a census. So in 2020 there was a census. Now, again, if the Muslim community, and by the way, Naperville had the highest turnout in the United States for any city in terms of submitting those surveys, right? What the survey does is that it brings resources from the state government, the federal government to your city, okay? At that point, let's say you're not comfortable voting this time around, you still vote, you don't choose a candidate at that point, right? But you still vote. However, the other part is you get involved in other things, such as make sure that you're completing your census so that the funding is coming. So you're civically engaged, not just voting. Voting is very important, but then these are all these other things that make us part of this land. This is our land. Many times people think that, oh, we've come from India or Middle East or where have you. There you go, right? But this is our land. This is where God has put us, and we are obligated to make sure that there is justice and the right things that are on this land. And the way we do it, there's so many different ways that the sister talked about.
I appreciate that answer so
Let's
much.
not forget,
And
our vote made a difference in Plainfield Masjid.
Yeah.
They're changing a vote from no to a definite yes.
100%. And I'll also say, because I sit in that tension, and I think what helps me is in recognizing we're not voting for a person because we think that they have the utmost morality and ethics, and they represent in the best manner possible all the values that we need to encompass. We are actually voting for any candidate because they're a tool. They're a tool to be able to push policy that's important. This is how politics works. And sometimes, we have to wrap it up. Okay, so I think there's no more time for questions. We're gonna stick around. We're gonna play a shot. I think my voice is going over to the solo. So we're going to stop here. We're gonna, Marina and I are gonna stick around until after Salah, inshallah, if you have any questions, and we'll answer some consent about it. Thank you so much for your time.
I was told 8, so.